And welcome everyone to week 3 of your semester in your sport and recreation and sales course. This chapter, we're going to be talking about products and pricing. This is an extremely important chapter. Without the base knowledge of this chapter, you're not going to understand the rest of the semester. So really understand what we're talking about here. I'm going to do my best to kind of reiterate certain things from the chapter that are most important, but really make sure that you're spending your time on this chapter. I know it's only about 20 pages, so read through this and then probably read through it again and refer back to this because there are a lot of terms that we're going to go over and a lot of important knowledge that you're going to need to know. As always, don't hesitate to reach out. If you have any questions, any comments, or you want clarification on any of this infrastructure, definitely talk to me about it. All right, so jumping right in, here are the key terms from your book. Again, you're going to see these in your book, so make sure that you're learning the definitions for all these. For the first time, we're seeing B2B sales come into place. We're seeing B2C sales come in place. We're talking a lot about pricing structures here too. So you're going to see dynamic pricing. You're going to see customary pricing. You're going to see penetration pricing. You're going to see skimming pricing. You're going to see a lot of these different things, variable pricing, which is really important and was kind of the way that I worked at the USOPC. We were all about variable pricing, which I came up with myself. So really important information here. The first key terms in here. The second, some of these you've probably seen before, others that maybe you've dealt with or maybe you've heard and you might not know. So again, just make sure you're really comfortable with all these terms. So let's talk about sport. So sport itself, the product is not necessarily something like any other industry, right? You know, if you're in the cell phone business, you are selling cell phones, right? You're selling cell phones. This is a product that's tangible, all right? This is a product that is predictable, and this is a product that is consistent, all right? And we know that for a number of reasons. One, because we've had cell phones for probably your entire lifestyle or lifespan at this point. Others being that, you know, this is Apple. So most people know Apple. It's a huge company. Tangible, that we can feel it, predictable because we know what we can use it for, and then consistent as well, meaning that we know what we're getting out of this. Sport is quite the opposite. It's intangible. We can't touch it. It's unpredictable, and it's very inconsistent, right? These are consistent. Sport is inconsistent, right? We go to a game and we can't touch it, as I talked about. We don't know who's going to win. That's why they play the game. That's the old saying, is that's why they play the game. And it's inconsistent, right? You could see something totally different, you know, this time versus this. There are certain predictabilities, you know, that you'll see, things that are predictable in nature, such as, you know, the length of quarters, the length of halves, the distance for a 3-point line, the distance for a home run might be a little different, right? So there are certain things that we know to be true, and then others that are going to be inconsistent, and we may see for the very first time, you know, each and every time we go to the ballpark or to the arena. Sport product is selling an experience. It's selling a memory, right? I mean, I can vividly remember where I was when the Cardinals won the World Series in 2011 because I was in the stadium. Right. That's an experience that I had, and that's a memory that sport created that I will never forget. The same thing in 2013 when we won the national championship at Louisville. I worked on the basketball team there. That's an experience for me and a memory that I'll never forget. Right. So that's what sport does. The product of sport is selling this lifestyle. It's selling this experience and this memory. And again, as I just touched on, perhaps it's a lifestyle for some. You know, I just got back from Manchester, England. Had the privilege to go to the Manchester United Liverpool soccer game. And that is a lifestyle for most of the people that were going to the game. They live, they eat, they breathe, they drink, they die Manchester United or Liverpool, right? It's very much a lifestyle. And we're going to talk about a couple of things that sport organizations are doing to make it fit even more of a lifestyle when we talk about club memberships, more of an experience, you know, as opposed to just going to see a game. It's more of everything that is involved in the game, as well as everything that's involved outside of the game, part of that experience. So ticket packaging, we talked about a little bit this last week when we talked about, you know, the different types of workers within a sales force and a sport organization. So ticket price or ticket packages that used to just be what they say. They were named because they were season tickets, right? They weren't called 10 game tickets. They weren't called half season tickets. They were called season tickets because when you purchased them, you got tickets to the entire season, all the home games for that season. Now we have full season tickets, we have half season tickets, we have 10 game packages, holidays, weekend, weeknights. We have all these different types of packages to better suit the consumer. I can remember growing up, we had St. Louis Cardinals season tickets, but we lived 3 hours away from St. Louis. So we were not able to go to 81 home games. Even though we had all 81 tickets, we did not go to all 81 home games. So it probably would have been better if we did a half season or a 10 game package or things of that nature. And so that's what the club is trying to do is if you're intimidated by one, there's probably a customized package that makes more sense. Looking at this frequency escalator model, there's a really good graphic on page 60 in your textbook, which talks about this frequency escalator model. And it talks about target marketing segmentation to understand the consumer. So as opposed to what we talked about in chapter 1 of, the transactional nature of sales, used to be transactional in nature. Now it's very much transformational in nature. We're no longer just trying to schlep tickets on, a random person that walks through the door or that we're trying to get to walk through the door. We're taking our time to understand who the people are that are buying the tickets and why they're buying the tickets. We're trying to understand them so that we can cultivate that relationship and hopefully move them up the escalator as shown in the frequency escalator model. We go from the non-consumers all the way to the indirect consumers to the consumers, right? All the way up from the light users to the non-users to the light users to the medium users to the high users that have so much brand association. They're going to come back time and time again, and they're going to spend money, head over heels, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times the initial investment of their initial ticket. Right. So that's the frequency escalator model. And it's talking about this transformational experience where we're trying to fully understand the market. Who is our target market? How do we need to be approaching them? And what are they looking to do? What are they looking to experience so that we can sell them exactly what they're looking for and make sure that they have a great time each and every time they come to the park or come to the arena. As I said, the more you know about a consumer, the better you can effectively and efficiently target that consumer. If you are working with somebody who works weekends, you're talking to a consumer who works weekends, you're probably not going to be selling them weekend tickets. If you're talking to a school teacher, you're talking to someone who works 8 to 5 or, traditional hours throughout the week, probably doesn't make sense to sell them on weekdays. They're probably looking for something to do on the weeknights, right? So it's really trying to understand who that consumer is, what they do, what makes them tick, what the experience is that they're looking for. Are they looking for the best seats possible? Are they looking for certain teams that they want to see? Are they just trying to have, a night out? Are they trying to, whatever it is, you need to understand that. You need to ask questions so that you can understand who this person is to better target this audience effectively and efficiently. And the goal, as we talked about, is to convert the consumers from non-consumers to indirect consumers to medium users to heavy users, right? We want to talk about getting people all the way up the chain, all the way up the escalator so that they're heavy users for your brand and that you really have a fully engaged person who you're not having to start from scratch. So ticket sales, we talked about this in the intro. We have business to business sales and we have business to consumer sales, right? So business to business is exactly what it is. It's my business selling to businesses. We talked about corporate partnerships. We talked about suites. We talked about club level, things of that nature, group sales. This is what this is looking at. Business maybe is coming to, treat their employees out. Maybe they're trying to have brand association with the team in terms of corporate partnership. Maybe it's a group that's coming out to celebrate, like a church group or somebody like that. That's business to business. And then you have your business to consumers, which is, the business organization selling to, me, selling to an individual, selling to consumers as opposed to a business represented by an entity, right? So typically, in terms of retention, if you look at 80 to 85% of retention, that's considered good. 90 plus is considered very, very strong or very, very good, right? So essentially that's saying that of all the tickets that a team sells in 2022, they want to be able to retain at least 80 to 85% of those people for 2023, right? And typically when we're talking here, we're talking about group sales, we're talking about businesses, we're talking about people who are invested more so than just one ticket. We want to make sure that the person who is buying one ticket this year is buying 2 tickets or 3 tickets or 4 tickets next year. And we want to make sure that we're retaining those big dollar amounts, those premium seats and things of that nature, our corporate partnerships. We want to make sure we're retaining those at about an 80 to 85% clip at the very least. 90 plus, obviously much better. Partial plans, group tickets, single game tickets, these are things we've talked about in the past. The premium seating, we've talked about that as well. Those are your courtside seats. Those are your suites. Those are your club level tickets. Those are your high level tickets, right? Your high level seating. And then lastly, your sponsorship. We talked about corporate partnerships. Maybe this is naming rights for a facility such as Oracle Arena, where the Golden State Warriors we talked about that last week. Oracle obviously pays for the naming rights for the Warriors Stadium. In-venue signage, advertising, logo placement, and event hospitality. These are all things that we're all very familiar with. If you watch a game, you see a television broadcast, you're always seeing the corporate partners, you're always seeing that advertising, you're always seeing the logo placement. And these are things that people pay money for to the organization. So most importantly, out of this entire chapter is your pricing, right? So the key is, how do you price something? What are people doing to price? Do you just pick a random number and say, let's go with it, let's see what happens? Or do you have some information behind it? Do you do some research into it? So at the very, very basic, pricing is meant to maximize revenue, right? If I'm willing to sell this phone for $500, right? If I'm willing to sell this for $500 and somebody is willing to buy this at $300, then they're not going to buy this phone, right? Because they're willing to pay $300. I'm willing to give them $500, or I'm willing to sell it at $500. They're only willing to pay $300. So therefore we're not going to sell this phone. All right. On the flip side, let's say that somebody is willing to buy this phone for $1,000. I'm willing to give it to them for $500. Well, then we are losing out on money that we could have made by selling this phone, right? Does that make sense? So building off of that, the whole point of pricing is to get that to match, all right? To maximize the revenue as much as possible. Again, we talked about revenue being the money coming into the organization, costs being the money that's going out of the organization. So profit is what we're looking to make up in terms of pricing. We want profit to be at an all-time high, right? And you get profit by basically subtracting the cost out of the revenue that you're bringing in. So if you bring in money, if you bring in $10 and you spend $8 on costs, your profit is $2. So the goal is to minimize your costs as much as possible while maximizing revenue. And we do that using these pricing strategies. So question is, how much should you charge someone for an item, right? And the answer is however much someone is willing to pay for an item and not $1 more, okay? So the value is the perceived benefits divided by the price, all right? And we just talked about that, right? If somebody's willing to buy this phone for $1,000, I want to know that. I want to sell this phone to them for $1,000. If I sell it to them for $990, I'm losing $10 that could have been profit. If I'm willing to sell this to them for $1,001, they're not going to buy it, right? So we want to maximize the profit by making sure that our pricing is exactly the amount of money that someone is willing to pay for it, not $1 more, because then they won't buy it, not $1 less, because then we're leaving profit on the table. So there are several strategies that companies will use to help try to price. And these are a few, and it talks about these a little bit in the book, but we're going to go through each and every one of these. So the first is penetration pricing. So this is when companies choose to keep costs low or price low, so that people can sell in larger quantity. Netflix is a great example of this. Netflix, came out and they were able to capitalize on a lot of the market share. And as you've seen, they've basically changed the entire model. stores like Blockbuster and stores like Home Movie Videos and things of that nature are completely out of the picture now because they were not able to keep up with the penetration pricing. Penetrating meaning that Netflix came into the industry and they were able to gain a lot of the market share because they kept their prices very low. And they were able to do that in a way that stores like Blockbuster and things of that nature were not able to do. So then you have skim pricing, which is when prices are kept high. So Apple, right? The iPhone, they're very expensive. We know this, but everybody has one, right? I would say, they have a majority of the market share, but they keep their prices very high. By doing that, people like Apple look at these iPhones and they say, hey, this is a quality product, right? That's the reason people are willing to buy at a premium price, is because there's perceived value, right? So we go back to what value is. Value is the perceived benefits for the price. So I believe as an iPhone user that I'm getting so much value out of this, meaning that the perceived benefits are greater than the price that I'm paying for it, right? If the perceived benefits are less than the price that I'm getting for it, then I'm not going to buy this phone, right? It goes back to the example that we just used. If the perceived benefits of this is $1,000 and the price point is $1,200, I'm not going to buy this phone, right? But if the perceived benefits is greater than the price that somebody's willing to pay, then I'm going to purchase this phone every single time. The next is customary pricing. If you all are old enough to remember Redbox. So Redbox was kind of the first to break away from the traditional, Blockbuster and things of that nature. So Redbox essentially came in, they priced their product at a level for an extended period of time that was very, very low. And because of that, there became a known association at that certain level. You could go get a Redbox for $1, right? It was cheaper than going to the movies, and they had new releases sometimes quicker than what you had at Blockbuster. And you didn't have to walk into the store. You could see these red boxes anywhere that you went. McDonald's, fast foods, Walmarts, things of that nature. But it became very customary that Redbox was $1. Didn't matter what you were getting. It didn't matter how many you were getting. It maintained this particular level for a long period of time. Then you have product line pricing, which is essentially when an organization not just sets prices for a single product, but rather establishes a systematic range of prices for a group of related products. So the BMW X series, for example, there's a pricing point for the X1, which is the smaller model, all the way up to the X7, right? So you have the X1, which is differently priced from the X3, which is differently priced from the X5 and then the X7. And each price point is a different level of vehicle, right? Doesn't mean that they're not the same level of quality or things of that nature. It just means that they're different products within a similar line, and such, they're priced very differently. And then finally, you have your bundle pricing, which is essentially a package of group or separate products that are packaged together and sold from one. Again, if you're old enough to remember any sort of infomercials, they'll be selling steak knives on a TV commercial. And then next thing you know, if you buy the steak knives right now, you get a free ship in a bottle. You get a free, antique, replica of something else, right? So they start throwing in all these prices and basically saying, hey, if you purchase this, you not only get this item, but you get a number of these different things. And that's called bundle pricing. So lastly, we're going to look at a few of the pricing trends that are out there. Some of these you may have dealt with in the past. Maybe you haven't. So pricing trends. So personal seat license. So personal seat license basically means that at an arena or at a stadium, you're essentially purchasing that particular seat. You are paying money for that seat to be yours. And you see a lot at stadiums nowadays, they'll do concerts, they'll do other community events, they'll do other games aside from just the traditional team that plays there. For example, when I was working for the Indiana Pacers, of course, were the primary tenant, but then groups would come in, they would do plays, they would do concerts, they would do swimming events, they would do other college basketball games. A personal seat license means that you own that particular seat, right, at that particular time, right? So you pay basically what's considered like a donation or a license, in order to purchase your tickets. And therefore, any other event that comes in there, you have first right of refusal for those particular seats, right? So that's becoming very popular, especially when you get to better seats. Pretty much everyone is required to purchase a personal seat license for, quality seats at a particular stadium or arena. Secondary ticket market. I'm sure that you've probably used this in the past, whether it's StubHub, whether it's Ticketmaster, whether it's Vivid Seats, things of that nature. Now the professional sport leagues and collegiate conferences are partnering up with these secondary ticket market. That's essentially to mean that the consumer is not purchasing directly from the organization, but rather is purchasing from another consumer via an online forum, such as a secondary ticket market, right? That's how, you'll see that a game is a sellout, but then you can go online, you can go to StubHub and you can repurchase tickets that are being resold. Perhaps people can't go to the game. Perhaps people just want to sell their tickets, make a little bit money, whatever it may be. That's considered the secondary ticket market because it's not being purchased directly from the organization. Then you have variable pricing. So variable pricing essentially means that it changes based off of demand. When I was with the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, we were slammed during Olympic Games and Paralympic Games time, right? So when the games were going on, everybody wanted to come to the training centers. Therefore, we set our prices much higher, right? So variable pricing means that they change based on the time of the year. It also changes based on the demand. So prices during the Olympic Games series or times, or pricing during the summer months when people were traveling and people were, kids were out of school, things of that nature. We set our prices higher than during December and January when nothing was going on and people didn't want to get outside. We set our pricing much lower. So that's variable pricing. And then you have dynamic pricing. Dynamic pricing essentially means that you're paying for the quality of the product at any given time. So, for example, being a St. Louis Cardinals fan, the big rival for the St. Louis Cardinals is the Chicago Cubs. So Chicago Cubs tickets are usually higher because of this dynamic pricing, as opposed to a team that may come in here only once a year or maybe every other year, like the Miami Marlins. Those tickets are going to be priced much less because the demand for those tickets for a Marlins Cardinals game is not nearly what a Cubs Cardinals game is. So you can charge more for it. That's considered dynamic pricing. The same thing for a game that featured a game in the end of the NFL season, which features two playoff potential teams as opposed to two bottom seller teams. And then finally are membership clubs. So membership clubs are, kind of that lifestyle that we talked about. Teams are doing a good job of opening up arenas to private socials, to experience, to meet and greets, things of that nature. These very exclusive club memberships that people are getting access to by being associated with these teams, with these organizations. So membership clubs, just like any other membership, like a Sam's card or a Costco card, it essentially is a price point that gets you in the door, which gets you access to these great deals, not necessarily products, again, as we talked about with sport, but more services, more experiences, more opportunities for exclusivity. So that's all we're going to talk about through this. Again, I can't reiterate enough. This is an extremely, extremely important chapter. So make sure that you're reading everything in this chapter. Make sure that you're going back through this PowerPoint. I've highlighted some really, really good stuff that's in here. So make sure that you know this. This is going to be really pivotal moving forward. So make sure that you really understand this. And again, as I mentioned at the forefront, reach out to me with any questions, comments, concerns, and I'm happy to clear things up for you. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you have a great week.